Welcome back to Behind the Play. My name is Alex Adams, and today I'm really excited to introduce our guest, Donnovan Bennett, who writes for Sportsnet and hosts the show Going Deep on how the sports we love intersect with health, fashion, race, religion, gender, politics, and everything in between. And I first wanted to say a little bit that I really admire your show, just because it's something I try to emulate a little bit in mine. So thanks so much for taking the time and coming on.
No, that's high praise. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. I just wanted to start a little bit about kind of what drew you to a career in sports journalism and writing.
That I wasn't talented enough to play on the field, so I figured I could stay as close to it as possible. I was a university athlete, played football in Canada at Western, and my whole time throughout my childhood playing different sports. When I wasn't playing sports, I was watching them, and when I wasn't emulating the athletes on the court or the field, I was emulating the broadcasters, and so I always knew that would be, my plan B, so to speak. And ever since I was a kid, every uh, paper that I had to write or project that I had to do, I would work a sports angle into it somehow. It was the only thing that really uh, got me excited and that I was passionate about. My mom would always say, if you memorize your math formulas as well as you did sports stats, you'd be getting a lot better grades. And I was like, well, if they were as interesting, then I'm sure I would. And I remember in economics class in high school, I had to do a presentation, and it was on the Larry Bird exemption of the NBA, CBA. Like, so that's kind of where I was thinking in grade 11 and 12. So it was just a natural fit for me coming out of school that when I wasn't um, going to be playing professionally, because at the time, the market for 5'9 3/4", 170 pound Canadian tailback was not huge in professional football. That I would stay close to sports and cover it. And so lucky, I was able to exit out of playing, but still use my acumen in terms of what I learned about football and about sports in general, and still be a part of a team and still compete. So yeah, uh, it was a nice parachute to have when the shock of no longer being an athlete hit.
And what was that kind of transition like, and maybe detail to the listener a little bit how kind of you made that transition and are where you are now at Sportsnet.
So, and as I said, I consume sports all the time, and you know, in my university house, the NFL Network logo was like burned into the TV because it was on so often. And we'd be watching, like we would literally watch the entire NFL combine, like every
Wow.
drill. We were into it. As a football house. And so, mistakenly I assumed that the process in Canada is the same as the process in the NFL, where if you're looking at draft prospects, people are on campus, looking at what they're doing in terms of what are the practice habits. People are like hailing their cars, seeing what they're like in their social life. And I was like, this is not happening for me in the CFL. So evidently, there is no pro career there. Truth of the matter is, in the CFL, our season is at the same time as their season. Their staffs are smaller, so during the season, their focus is the season, and they don't get to the draft up until after the season. So I didn't. Once our season ended, I thought, okay, well, there's no interest from a CFL perspective. I'll focus all of my energy and attention on broadcasting and getting a job there. And then the draft comes around and teams want to work me out and bring me in for interviews. Like, oh no, like I've actually punted this football and have been so focused on putting all that energy into making a career otherwise. So I had a couple workouts and like a camp invite as I wasn't drafted. And I kind of at that time said, I'm not really prepared to take advantage of this opportunity. I'm probably, if I'm being honest, ego aside, probably being looked at as like a training camp tackle dummy and not
Mhm.
like a true opportunity I do have an in at the Score Television Network, and I don't want to start my career to send the message of, yeah, he's half in, but there's a bunch of injuries for like right up backs on special teams in
Yeah.
in July. He's gonna be on the first plane to Winnipeg or Regina or whatever.
Yeah.
So I wanted to show my first employer I'm like about this life. I'm really serious and I take the craft seriously. So, I guess I'll go backward. Our season ends, we lose. I had interned at the Score, and I was trying to get internships through the normal channel. Wasn't getting any luck. Everyone was saying to me, "You need more experience." I'm like, "Well, how do I get experience without you giving me experience?" It's a double-edged
Hmm.
sword. Reach out to Dwayne Ford, who worked at the Score at the time, hosted a show called CFL Snap, and was the play-by-play person for the university sports that they covered. Now, obviously, doing a great job with the CFL and TSN. He was a Western alum, Western football alum, Western running back from Toronto. And aside from the fact that he is, 100 pounds heavier than me, I was like, okay, there's something here. Like, maybe he'll have an affinity for me. Picked his brain about the industry, got his contact from our coaches and some of our alumni people. And essentially after that, I said, listen, man, I'm gonna be honest. I'm gonna stalk you. Like, I need an internship. You have a show. Can you help me? Like, you don't want those problems. So you just help me get in the door. And so he sends like an email, and the next thing you know, I'm interning on the Score. Do that throughout the summer, would go back throughout the school year just so that they would remember my name and face. And when I went to Western for my last year, I said, listen, I'm fully planning on winning the Vanier Cup. But in the event that we lose early, I'm happy to help with your playoff coverage. And that was the first year the Score had the Vanier Cup right. So it was a big deal for them. It was like their Super Bowl. And they were like, yeah, sure, we can use the help. And I'm thinking, you know, coming off the field, like you see in the pros, someone gets knocked out there in the studio doing analysis because they'd played against the team still playing, so on and so forth. Not what happened. I was like rolling cables. I was uh, on the phone telling them where the ball was spotted. And so like the truck
Yeah.
in Toronto could like put the virtual first down line at the right place. These are the types of jobs that I got, but I was just happy to be around and learn. And so the Vanier was in Saskatchewan. I drove from across Ontario, London to Ottawa to help out for the semis, the national semis. Nationals are in Vancouver or Regina, sorry. And I say, hey, listen, I can help out in Saskatchewan. And the head like exec producer on the games was like, really? And even in my head, like I'm having this out of body experience where I'm like looking at myself like, dude, really? And I'm like, yeah, got some money saved up for a spring break trip. I could apply it to that, and like, let's do it. They're like, listen, well, we can't pay you. The media hotel's full. We can't put you up. But here's where we're staying. Here's where we're going to be. If you can get yourself there, get close. We'll use the help.
Wow.
So
Wow.
got some money, a little help from my parents, and used the money I'd saved for a spring break trip. Flew to Saskatoon. It was minus everything. It was like minus 26, like a record. How cold it was that week. Got in myself a hotel close, and I just did whatever they asked. And I was learning the business, like you firsthand from people who were really good at the time and would go on to do great things. So on that broadcast, you have Sarah Lesky, who
Wow.
went on obviously to work for TSN. You had Tim doing the
Wow.
play-by-play, Dwayne Ford doing the color. You had Sid Sixero and James Sabalski and
Wow.
Adnan Verk doing sidelines. You had Cabby doing hits and features throughout. And that's just on air. Not to mention like all the really talented directors, producers, executives that would go on to do great things. Don Landis, who the director of that game, is one of the greatest that we have in our country, and she directs things for CTV like the Royal Wedding and the MMVA. So this is
Wow.
the type of talent that we had at the Score. Like the Score was the Montreal Expos of sports broadcasting, where they produced all this talent for the rest of the industry. So long story short is I learned like I got a better education that week than I got the 4 years
Hmm.
in school. But on the flip side, they saw me and saw me work and how serious I took the crap, and that I was really interested in learning, and that gave me a leg up from everyone else who was coming out of my university class in terms of getting a broadcasting role. Started at the score, again, terrible role in closed captioning. Um, they had a software where I would, re-speak everything that I heard on the TV, and it was like
Wow.
Siri before Siri, where the computer program would spit it out, and I'd put in the punctuation and speakers and whatnot. It was a terrible job. I wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy, but got me in the building, start helping out, doing things part time that builds my career, and it actually, I got to watch what was on the network. I could understand like this is why this content works. This is why this content doesn't work. If I was doing this, this is what I would do differently. It had me speaking and saying things that people on air were saying, and so I was learning about
Mm.
communicating and putting sentences together that sound natural and organic, but are also informative and that are easy to follow. So again, I just try to take any opportunity and make lemonade out of the lemon that I was given. And so I've continued to stack those opportunities, and seeing where they've got me. And it's like how many years later? It's like 15 years later.
Wow.
And
Yeah.
yeah, my past still works, and I'm still employed. So so far so good.
I guess I wanted to go off that a little bit, and when you were coming up at that time, how did you carve a role? Because you don't just in the work you've done just stick to sports and really talk about the broader issues, especially as you in your show Going Deep. So how did you carve that out in the industry to find that role?
Yeah, it's a great question. So what I say to aspiring broadcasters, journalists, people in the workforce in general is the secret sauce is figuring out what is unique about you, what
Mm,
your intrinsic advantage is. So we're all snowflakes, right? God created us all uniquely. We all have different skill sets, sensibilities, past experiences. So the real key is figuring out what that is, identifying it,
mm,
figuring out how you can leverage it to your benefit, lean into it, all the while working on your weaknesses so that they become strengths. And so for me, you know, early on, that was the fact that I was a former university football player. It'll change throughout your career, and it has changed for me. So the first way I get on air is talking about university football, and
yeah.
not just broadcasting, reporting. The segment I had was in the trenches with Donnovan Bennett. And so I was like the Tony Saragusa like person. I was on the sidelines, but breaking down the X's and O's,
Mm,
what I'm seeing, the adjustments, that type of thing. Because again, I just come off the field.
yeah.
I didn't have the reporter reps of how do you cultivate a story, how do you, report on injuries, that type of thing. I would learn those over time by being down there. So the people who'd done it at a high level. But I could bring to the table my football acumen, so that's one way early, and then you figure out what that is. I said, hey, we don't do any features. There's a change in the producer for these games, and I said, we don't do any features. Like I can do these feature interviews,
Yeah.
and they're like, I don't see why not. Sure. So I start doing feature interviews at halftime. It's something that didn't exist, and now it does. Then I'm doing feature interviews with university students. They're no different than the NCAA students. So I started doing NCAA feature interviews for
Hmm.
our March Madness coverage because we had got March Madness right. That was a big deal for us as well. Trying to leverage that. One of the things I did early was I got reps as a producer, writing scripts for people and producing. And every week I would do a little bit more to help the producers to the point where I was producing my own pieces. The reason I stopped doing closed captioning is because the host started complaining, and they're like, "Can we just hire this guy full time as a producer? I don't want to go into a voice booth and whisper to ask him questions about a script because he is voicing, for closed captioning." So then get part time reps as a producer. I'm producing so many things part time that I'm running out of people to put in my segments that I start putting myself in the segments and I start hosting them.
Hmm.
So there's one trip. I went to one trip. I went to Syracuse for an NCAA story. Like the last stop on our campus tour, a bunch of places. The producer was supposed to go, was sick and under the weather, had to drive to Syracuse in a snowstorm. The executive said, "Hey, Donnovan, do you want to go instead of him? This is
Mm.
what we're looking to execute." I'm like, "Great, go there, get the two stories we're supposed to execute." Talking to the PR person, one of the players we're supposed to talk to was sick. He felt really bad. So if you're make good, can I give you some other players? I'm like, yeah, sure. Can I get an extra one? As a make good. So I've secured the interviews that we need. Now I get this bonus one. I throw myself into the bonus one as the host. Bring it back. Say, hey, listen, I got the two we were supposed to get. I also got this third one. You take it or leave it. I'm in it. I'm the host. Do you want it? No. They're like, yeah, sure. It's extra content. So now I'm, one of the people with Glenn Sheeler and Sid Cicero that are the faces of
Wow.
these NCAA features. Fast forward to the next year when they're breaking down the schedule of who is going to go where, they have me doing some of them because like, oh man, like he can go, he can produce it and he can host it. So we've
Yeah.
actually saved the plane ticket, we saved the hotel. Donovan, these are yours. Go have fun. So it's
Yeah.
using your experiences, what you can bring to the table, as a way to get yourself further opportunities. One other thing I did at the Scores, I pitched the Black History Month feature because we didn't do anything for Black History Month, and they're like, yeah, so like interesting concept. Go do one, see how it does. I did four, one for every week. They
Hmm.
ended up being nominated for a Gemini
Oh,
at the
congrats.
time, Canadian Screen Award. So
Hmm.
now it's like we've got accolades and praise for it. Okay, well now this is part of what we do because
Hmm.
we're known for it. And everyone likes to feel good about things, and so moving forward, that's the big thing. And like I'm now heading up that content and running it. So you using what comes natural to you to make sure that you've got some stuff to work on that you really like and that stuff to work on that you're going to excel at because it's natural to you. And so to answer your original question, I love sports, but I love sports because it allows us to have these other bigger, broader conversations. And quite frankly, I'm interested in a lot of things. And so if I can use sports as a reason to talk about all those things, then it puts me in an even better position.
I just wanted to go back quickly about you mentioned like making those pieces for Black History Month and as a person of color, what was it like to kind of bring those stories to light? Was there pushback and what's your experience like been in the industry as a person of color?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think, listen, when we're talking about doing something different, and when we're talking about certainly race, there's always going to be pushback. I think the thing that you have to think about when going into doing those stories is you're not going to please everyone, right? So you have to understand it's part of the rules of engagement off the top, and you have to like understand your why. Why are you doing it? Why is it important? What can you do to further the conversation? And maybe what can you do to show some representation for audiences who don't necessarily see themselves in the content all the time to add a level of awareness, but also for me to add some entertainment. I think often, you know, if we use Black History Month content as an example, a lot of it is very like biographical. It's
Yeah.
kind of like you're taking your medicine, you're reading encyclopedia. And for me, like, Black history is made every day, all the time, right? Like LeBron James is a living Black historical figure. Serena Williams, the same thing. So, having conversations in ways that are certainly informative, but still entertaining. At the end of the day, that's our job. Is is important. And so, I try to approach these types of content opportunities not necessarily as like a history lesson. I try to approach them as, if you remember when we were in school, in high school, there would be a play,
Yeah.
every semester or every term. And those plays often you might learn something from it, you might get something from it, it might be historical, but it's entertaining, right? If I was a teacher and I was trying to teach, British history, I could read from a book, or I could get a Netflix subscription and make my class watch The Crown. Right?
Yeah.
Two different ways. And so that's the way I approach it. And then ultimately, when you're making content that's entertaining, which by definition is our job, if the subject matter just happens to reflect discussions that are really important, albeit discussions about a equity deserving group, Black History Month, Asian Heritage Month, National Indigenous Peoples Day, Pride, International Women's Day, National Day for Truth and Reconciliation, et cetera, then that's a win-win in my aspect. So I've tried to not make it too big of a thing. Just think about this is an opportunity to connect with the audience and entertain. We're just making sure that we're checking all the boxes so that we're doing that in terms of stories that connect with all Canadians, not just Canadians that we historically have connected with.
Yeah. I wanted to go a little bit to transition a little bit to some of the sports that, I mean, you listening to your show, I know you know basically everything about a lot of different sports, but I want to go to the CFL, and obviously you mentioned you played. There's a lot of discussion in that kind of zone about where do you see the state of the CFL right now? Is it dying? There's been articles about that, and I just want to hear your 2 cents.
Yeah, so I think I don't think the CFL is dying, certainly. I think it's in a transitional phase, it's having a bit of a metamorphosis, and I think change is always difficult for both sides. It, so the CFL is somewhat tough one. It's been around for over 100 years. It has persevered through, multiple commissioners, multiple prime ministers, multiple sensibilities in terms of our country, multiple recessions in our country. So, aside from COVID and wartime, Grey Cup has been handed out in the end of November, longer than anyone walking this earth has been alive. So I always pause when people say, "Oh, this is gonna be the death of the CFL." Like, CFL's been on life support many times, and it's still kicking. So there's that. I also think that you know most of our media comes from Southern Ontario, and the relationship with the CFL in Southern Ontario, specifically in Toronto, is different than it is in many areas of the country. Right? You could take a 50-minute drive from Toronto to Hamilton. I'm currently situated somewhat in the middle in Mississauga. And if you polled an average person in those cities and asked them about the CFL, their experience with it is appreciably different, right? You go to Hamilton and in and around the stadium, you know that this is a CFL city. On a game day, people are selling spots on their lawn for parking, right? In and around the stadium at BMO on a CFL game day, you might know that there's a CFL game because like there's less valet parking at Hotel X, right? Like that's just to frame how different the markets are. The CFL is, and that is within a pretty close vicinity. So it's appreciably different in Saskatchewan than it is in Vancouver, than it is in Montreal, because our country is somewhat different. But I do think that with most sports in 2023, their lifeline is not being local or regional and relevant there. You have to be relevant in the global space. You have to be relevant in the internet age, in the digital space. And so I feel like I have an appreciation of what's going on in the NBA with Kevin Durant beefing with Joel Embiid because I
Yes.
see it play out on my tablet, on my phone, on my computer. That's where the CFL conversation needs to go for it to continue to grow. It can't just be people tailgating in Regina or people flying out to touchdown Atlantic and having a great time. The touch points can't just be personal because in stadium, outside of BMO, it's a great atmosphere.
Yeah.
Even in Ottawa when their team has been good, it's a great atmosphere. Um, but you have to transfer that energy in 2023 to the online arena so that we're constantly talking about it, it's trending. We're following the players on social media because more and more of our ad revenue is going to the digital space. So I think that's where the conversation goes next. Can the CFL tap into the conversations happening on those platforms? Music, fashion, culture, what fits the players wearing walking into, the stadium? Can the players be these little micro influencers where brands want to do deals with them based off of their social following? Well, in order to do that, we have to build that social conversation, not just the league or the teams, but the players. So I do think it, sometimes you gotta, when you're making a pivot, almost go backwards to propel you forward. And I think that's the area the CFL is in now. I will say this though, I am a believer that you can love all types of football at the same time. So much of the conversation is binary. Well, the NFL is better than the
Yeah.
CFL. Well, college football, the players at Power 5 schools are better than they are in the CFL, which is not true. I think you can just love football. I love to watch U Sports. I love to watch CFL. I love to watch
Hmm.
NCAA. I love to watch NFL. I don't care about the amount of downs. If something is on the line, I'm willing to watch great football. So I think if we can continue to market the game in the social and online digital space, I think the CFL will be around for another 100 years for sure.
I wanted to quickly transition to the NFL off that. I really liked your piece on Damar Hamlin, and I just thought I want to ask you quickly just a little bit about, like you mentioned in your article, how fans are desensitized to injuries, and the NFL has poor pensions, and I really like the line you also said, was that football is a kid's game with adult consequences. What else can be done in your mind to make the NFL and football, not just the NFL, more safe for players? Is there anything that can be done?
I mean, guaranteed contracts would be one,
Yeah.
right? I think people were surprised to realize, and I still think many of them didn't realize that if forget about performance, yeah, we got to pay this roster bonus by this time. We're going to cut this player and get him off our cap and manage our dead money, so on and so forth. Forget about that conversation, right? Just the humane side of you are loyal to us based off of this piece of paper, but we're not loyal to you, even though you're giving up your body. Forget about that. I think people were surprised to realize that if the Buffalo Bills put Damar Hamlin on IR, he was not guaranteed
Yeah.
the rest of his contract. Like, forget about like he's cut because he can't perform. Like, he can't perform because he's hurt to
Yeah.
the point where he can't play the year. You don't get your money. And the NFL came out and said, we're going to make sure he got his money, which I almost feel like is telling on themselves. Like, you are acknowledging the fact that we should take care of players if they're so hurt that they can't compete.
Yeah.
A couple of reasons. One, you can't ask players, whether it's head injuries or injuries at all, to self-report and be honest and take care of themselves. If at the same time you're like, yeah, but if you do that, we're going to take money out of your pocket.
Yeah. Exactly.
So, right, humans are motivated by what they're incentivized by. And so that's one. But two, you've now created this huge outlier where, wait, if you have to cancel a game because of my injury and I can't come back, you'll take care of me. But if you don't, and I'm carted off and I do the thumbs up thing and everyone just claps and goes back to, screaming defense, defense, then I don't get the money. So, thought experiment. Russell Gage, very end of the Cowboys, Tampa Bay Bucks playoff game,
Yeah.
vicious hit, carted off the field. Players taking a knee, praying for him. Does anyone know how Russell Gage is doing? He's not being put on IR because the season is over. But do we know what his return to play is going to look like? Is he going to be able to work out throughout the offseason? Is he going to be able to make his physical in training camp and get that report bonus? We have no idea. It's not even part of our lexicon. Like it's not part of the conversation. As soon as he was off the field, we stopped thinking about Russell Gage. And as soon as the Tampa Bay Buccaneers were off our television, we stopped thinking about them more broadly. So that's what I mean in terms of the humanity of the conversation that we have around football players. And we are desensitized from it because it happens so often in the sport. If there was like a crazy tennis mishap and
Yeah.
Kyrgios went head first into the umpire's tower and needed to be carted off, it would be a massive story, and we'd be talking about it all the time. The players are in a essentially a car accident every Sunday,
Yeah.
and we're like, are you probable or questionable? Because I'm trying to manage my flex spot, and
Yeah.
I need to know. So I think that's the next step that I hope the Damar Hamlin scenario illuminates for us, that we treat these players in a way like cattle.
I wanted to ask you before I let you go. I know your Super Bowl pick is the Chiefs. In your mind, who's the biggest challenger to the Chiefs?
Wow, that's a great question. I mean, I'd be remiss if I didn't say the team they're playing this week that has beat them three consecutive times and is just a bit of a matchup nightmare from them in the sense of defensively, Steve Spagnuolo, defensive coordinator for the Chiefs, loves to blitz, loves to bring more people than you can block, get the ball out of your hands quick, take his chances on the back end. We're going to die a quick death. Either we're going to get you off the field or you're going to score, one or the other. But either way, Patrick Mahomes not going to be sitting down freezing for long. Okay, that's cool. Well, Joe Burrow is like Joe Cool. Bring the blitz. I don't care. You really going to guard Jamar Chase and T. Higgins and Hayden Hurst and Boyd one-on-one? Yeah, cool. You're making my decisions easy for me. So on that side, it's not a great matchup. And on the flip side, uh, defensively, the Bengals and whoever have done so much in terms of like playing different games, giving odd looks, bringing people from different areas, not bringing people, and just having eight people sit in zone and make you like drive the field and really put together a 10, 12 play drive without making a mistake or without being antsy. That I think is a bit of a it's a bit of a it's almost like a Rubik's cube for
Hmm.
Mahomes and Andy Reid to like constantly try to figure out. So I think from a matchup standpoint, um, Cincinnati is a tough test, but I think the Eagles, you know, probably have like the best, most balanced roster. But in a one game scenario, San Francisco 49ers have just the most dudes.
Yeah.
Like if we're just talking about like getting off the bus, you look at a team who scares you,
Yeah.
who do you not want to play? Um, I think it's them. So I didn't answer your question because I said all three teams. My Super Bowl pick at the start of the playoff was Chiefs Niners, so I'll stick with it.
Okay.
Um, but yeah, I would say philosophically the Bengals, physically the 49ers.
Okay. I like it, and I mean I don't have any horse in the race, but I'm definitely a Patrick Mahomes fan, so that'd be cool to see them against the Niners again in the Super Bowl. Before I let you go, anything you want to plug? Anything the listeners should stay tuned for on your show, Going Deep? And thanks again for coming on, and hopefully we can do this again.
Well, after I said that, run to your nearest bookie and make sure you're following our SN Bets crew because they know much more than I. But run to your nearest bookie and bet everything you have on the Eagles because I kind of slept on them with my answer, so they're definitely going to win the Super Bowl. In terms of what we've got coming out, we're just days away from the month of February. We'll have a lot of Black History Month content,
Cool.
sportsnet.ca/, Black History Month or sportsnet.ca/BHM. But if you go to our homepage, you'll see a bunch of stuff cycling there throughout the week. Feb 1 this year is on a Wednesday, so every Wednesday we'll drop new original content. So be on the lookout for that. One of my favorite pieces that's coming out is a 4-part series, one each week, with myself, Cabby Richards, Enoch Nwamba, Grey Cup champ and most outstanding Canadian and MVP of the Grey Cup, and Stroy Tinker, the trailblazing female hockey player, where we get together over a meal and just talk about different issues in sport while eating, different food from historically Black regions of the world. So that'll be cool. Also in Feb 1, I got an interview with Masai Ujiri about everything he's done for the continent of Africa, and going deep. Yeah, 11 Eastern on the Fan 590, but really, it's done for the podcast audience. So like, favorite, share, subscribe. I've got some Black History Month themed pieces coming out in February. Recently, we had a great interview with Jason Priestley about his Harold Ballard doc, Offside. And we'll be previewing the playoff game as we get close to the Super Bowl. We'll do some stuff on Super Bowl commercials as well, which will be fun. And then as we get closer to trade deadline in the NBA and NHL, we'll be breaking that down as well.
Well, thank you so much, Donnovan, for taking the time and coming on. And yeah, good luck for the rest of the sports year.
Thank you for having me. My pleasure.